Good morning, all of you. And very beginning only, I would like to apologize for our previous day, some technical issues because of what many people couldn't join. So that is the reason we are again repeating the session. And maybe as today we are starting early, so we'll be able to take additional question and answers also, if at all it is raised by the participants. So So today I'm talking about Trustees Standard Version 3.1.0, the key changes and the insights about the changes. So when we are making any kind of changes, we are always focusing on few things. First is that when we came out our with the change version 3, after that we performed pilot projects, pilot audits in three areas. One is in South India, Rostan Mulai. Next one was in Assam, Dandaria tea estate, and last one was in West Bengal, Dalgaon tea. So the changes from version 3 to version 3.1.0 is basically based on the outcome of the pilot project and the stakeholders' feedback. So almost 1.5 years time, we put the code for stakeholders' feedback so that we can make the necessary changes in the code and making it more acceptable by the industry and more credible to the requirements of the global sustainability goals. So, moving towards the next slide, the changes here we have already mentioned in red, and based on the changes, we have added many criteria points, sub criteria points basically in our audit checklist so that people can get more clarity with like not only the auditors but also the entity people and the trainers as well, because we understand that when we are working on a single checklist basically based on the audit requirements that we have made, so once that checklist is very much detailed and defined with all the possible outcomes for the intent of the trustee code, that is very much important for the people to understand what is the intent and how to adhere the requirements by complying with the criteria points and to understand better the criteria points, the sub criteria points are added in the checklist. So in version 3.1.0, the main new thing that anybody can see, that is our audit checklist, what is applicable for estate, what is applicable for bottling, and additionally for the small tea growers. So we are having the checklist as an annexure to the current code, that is 3.1.0, which is available in our website. There you will open and you can see the detailed checklist, the audit checklist that has been used during the training, during the internal audit, during the external audit. So the single checklist we work on and to make the overall system more robust, and the necessary changes are now already put in the audit checklist. Maybe one or two very small changes that we have made. We will that once you download the checklist during your internal audit or training report making or the external audit, there maybe you will get one or two small changes, but otherwise the 99.99% thing are already there in our code and along with the annex checklist. So starting with general management chapter, G 1.1, where you can see the blue mention statement in the statement in blue color that is already there, and the red one that we have added in 3.1.0. So when we are talking about trustee program policy and objective statement, where we are talking about the documented KPI and the top management's commitment, there we are adding, while creating the policies for on workers' rights to freedom of association, the trade union representative shall be engaged. So why this is required? Because the policies are mainly for the workers. So when we are making a policy for the workers, and when that policy might change the like workers' term and conditions, their working term and conditions, their working rights and everything. Because of that, we are making policies. So in that phase, the making phase, it is very important to take the inputs from the trade union people who are basically the representative of the workers, so that the workers can get the information at the making phase only, that these policies are being on a like making, and these are the points in the policies. So if they are having any kind of inputs to that, they can always put forward through the workers representative. So it is very important to make an SOP. Now for the entities, it is understood that they are already having the policies. So what they can do, they can make one SOP, because the policies are already made, and that is already displayed in some places, some prominent places in the factory itself or in the garden. But now they must have an SOP also, with a SOP, where they will say that if there is any change in the policy, or if they are making a new policy, how they will um, engage the trade union representative. This point has to be there, and they can always come up with a revised policy where they can show that that policy is accepted by the trade union representative, or the existing policy only. They can put it forward in the for a, in a local language for them to understand, and then they can sign it off to keep it as an evidence with them, to show the auditors during their audit that they actually engaged the workers representative for the like existing making one, and whichever was already existing, which was already there, for those policies they have taken cognizance from the workers representative, union representative. So, and that acceptance letter or something similar should be available with the entity people. Now coming to the display, of course, display is very important. So display of the all policies in the local language or the language workers understand. This is very important again, because in Assam we automatically think the policies should be in Assamese, or in South India. If we are talking about Tamil Nadu, we might think that the policies will be in Tamil. But in many cases, especially for South India, we have seen that many workers from Assam or from Bihar, from West Bengal, they are going as a migrant worker, and they are working there. So even if they think that the policies are available in the local language, but that will not satisfy the requirement, because the people for who the policies are basically made, those people are unable to understand their local language. So in that case, they must have their local language as well as in the language that the worker will understand. So this is again a very important um, change that we have incorporated in our G1.1. We made the necessary changes in the audit checklist. So wherever you can see the green lines, that is that there you can understand that there are additional changes, additional requirements as a sub criteria that we have incorporated in the audit checklist. Now coming to the 3.1.2, there we are again talking the similar line, where we are making the risk management, analyzing the risk, whether it is like basically it's a program related risk based on the three pillars. So one is on livelihood, one is on environment, one is on safety. So these risk assessment or mitigation plan impact aspect, when we are determining that plan must include the potential risk related to the workers' right to freedom of association and others. So, like when we are talking about worker rights, that's mainly under the livelihood. So, whatever policies we are making, what can be the potential risk to that, related that risk, and that should be incorporated in the risk assessment. So, we basically we understood that people will automatically will be doing that, but as we have found the gaps in the policies or in the risk assessment, so that is the reason we thought of making it more elaborate, for so that people can easily understand the basic components of a policy, or when we are talking about any kind of risk assessment, or any kind of making any kind of plan stuff. So there we are making the requirements more explicitly, so that people can easily adhere the requirements. Coming to the next point, G1.6, where we are talking about the internal audit report, and the program policy objective statement. The audit should be done every year, minimum once in every year. There we have added as a part of continual improvement in an internal audit, if it is found in any system that is not functioning in a desired way, non-conformity will be raised on that occasion, and root cause analysis has to be a part of the NC closure. Why we have made this? Because we understood that again the intent of an internal audit is being lost. Why? Because people are doing internal audit just for the sake of doing an internal audit. They are not actually looking at the thing. So first thing is that it has to be a cross-functional audit, because the requirement, basic requirements of an internal audit is that it has to be cross-functional. We cannot audit our own system. So today, if I am responsible for system assurance, my system assurance part I cannot audit, because for my system I will always say that yes, whatever I'm doing is right. So it should be a cross functional. So maybe from IT or maybe from operation, the person responsible, he or she can do the part of my job while choosing the scope of the internal audit, and I can do their part. So that is how the cross functional internal audit happens, it takes place. So you have to ensure that every entity must have at least like minimum two or more internal auditor. So the trustee officer can always be an internal auditor, but along with that person, we need one or two more internal auditor who knows about the system, who knows how to do the internal audit, how to perform the internal audit, and they do the cross-functional internal audit. That's the first thing, first requirement. Now coming to the second requirement, once you perform a proper internal audit, then you will definitely come out with some non-conformities, which is not in line with the requirement, and there there are gaps. So how to close that? So there are two things. One is the correction. Correction means just for a very simple example, while during the internal audit there is an issue that raised as an infrastructural thing. So maybe some lock in the ladies' toilet was non-functional. That was a non-conformity on the infrastructural thing. Now the correction is then and there repair that lock. That is a correction, which is a instant solution. Now, when we are talking about continual improvement based on the root cause analysis, then that takes why that lock was broken, who was in charge. That is the root cause analysis, and why that person, even if they are having a schedule for the cleaning thing, then why they that was overlooked. So maybe while doing the root cause analysis, you might find that the person who is responsible for the cleanliness, for the scheduled cleaning and all, that person is not coming regularly, or maybe there is a like absenteeism for those particular job who are doing those kind of people, they are not coming regularly, or there is less people, the people are not available to do this thing, and maybe that there is a huge gap where you need more people. So that is a root cause analysis. And what would be the corrective action? Instead of or just not only correction, but corrective action is like a regular review of the process, regular checking the cleanliness part, the infrastructural thing, so that you do not miss something like that. And that root cause analysis and corrective action plan should be the part of the NC closure, where the points that has been raised in an internal audit come as a non-conformity that has been discussed in an like in within the management team, and they have come out with a solution with a corrective action and the root cause analysis, and maybe for that you need some money to be invested. So the whole thing will come as an action plan that we need, maybe monthly, if we appoint one person, monthly 5,000, 7,000 rupees we need to spend additionally. So yearly it will be a cost maybe more than close to 70, 80,000 rupees. So as a salary of one person, so that you need a kind of an approval from the top management. So during your MOM, you present that. like to the management review meeting there in the
चालू
MRM,
हुआ ना अच्छी
you present that. I would like to request every participant, please keep yourself mute. So that is something where we should understand why, what is the intent, and how we can um, keep the documented evidence to show the auditors, for the external auditors, and for the trainers. It is very important to make people understand the requirements very clearly and help them to like do the proper internal audit, proper NC closure, and proper MRM, management review meeting, to be properly documented so that they can show that, you know, in their external report. Yeah. And now, while doing the external audit, if the person, the auditor is finding that the internal audit, everything is like yes, and everything is compliant, but during their audit, they are finding a huge gap, then that means the internal audit was not effective. So there can be one non-conformity from the external auditor's part, that the internal audit was not effective, because they are finding many gaps which the people who are working there day in and day out, they were unable to find it out. So that means the person who is doing internal audit, either he is soft grading, soft auditing, or he is not competent, he or she is not competent enough to do the internal audit. So keeping all these things in mind, please, while doing your internal auditing, please be very much vigilant to this requirement and do it accordingly. Moving towards the next slide. So here in G 1.7, we are talking about the policies outlining the principles and the business ethics for applicable legal requirements. So the policy must include vendor ethics as well, especially for disclosing gifts, hospitality, and should address the actual or perceived or potential conflict with the internal control in place to monitor and identify potential breaches or fraud, and periodic compliance checks as a part of their protocol policy. So this policy, again, it is very important, and it should be a part of the risk assessment also, that what can be a risk when it comes to business ethics. And so based on that, you have to determine, you have to change your policy, or you have to see whether your policy is already having these components or not. If it is not there, please make reframe the policy and put all these address all these requirements to your policies. So again, as I said, like we have updated our audit checklist with the conflict of interest and ethics policy adequacy check. Coming to the next point, G 1.11. So we are talking about the documents and other electronics, how to retain the documents. So when we are talking about document retention, so again, as I said, we thought that they automatically put the point on how the documents will be destroyed after the retention period is over. So how safely they are doing that, but the policies are not talking about that. The policies are not reflecting these requirements. So again, to make it more easy to the people who are using or who are making the policies, we have incorporated this particular statement where we are saying the policy must say that the information is protected and all collected data or documents are processed, stored, transferred, and disposed of responsibly and safely. So it is very important to have a very clear policy that how you are disposing the data very safely and responsibly. So whether it is a physical data, whether it is an something like web or online or some digital data, data retention policy and data destroy policy is very important. So in one policy only, you can talk about all these requirements. But if your existing policy is not reflecting these particular topics, then please include these topics and make a revision to your existing policy. Next, coming to the last point, G 1.14 in this page, the grievance redressal mechanism, where we are talking about the negative anonymous feedback. I'm sorry, by mistake I didn't highlight it in red, but this is the point where we are talking about this negative anonymous feedback should be considered for relevance check. Earlier, this point was not there, but when we are doing this grievance mechanism redressal policy, making this, then that point of time, we have to consider also the anonymous feedback. So we must have a mechanism where we can take the anonymous feedback, and we can um, without disturbing the anonymity of that person, we should check what is there in the grievance or in the negative feedback, and work on that. At least for the relevance check, we should check whether that is relevant or not, to put it forward for to take it as a proper grievance, and then do the total check on that particular negative feedback. So this anonymous feedback mechanism has to be there also. Okay. So now that was G 1.1. So general management. Do you have any question on this? If you have any question on this, anybody is having any question? Yes, please. Uh, I'm unable to actually see if someone is having any question. I guess somebody raised their hand, so you can just unmute yourself and ask.
Um, Good morning, Anindita. This side Madhura. I have one question. Not
Yes.
question, just a little bit more elaboration on this anonymous grievances feedbacks. Any example you can just come up with?
Example means maybe the entities are having different grievance mechanisms. So people are having like grievance box, like
Hmm.
complaint box, that is there. They can have the any portal kind of a thing. Big companies are having website, they're having blowing, they're having different mechanism. Now there, if someday you receive a complaint like one of your manager is having like doing some malpractice on certain things, maybe during purchase he's adding some extra commission on his name, and he is giving the business to that particular vendor, so that later on he can get a commission from that vendor. So something like that, without telling that who is the complainant. Like if I'm making the complaint, I'm not writing my name, but I'm just complaining. No, the first thing is that there are many things that can come as a just to defame a person, so that is also a thing. So if you think that you will defame a person, you might say something negative about somebody, or you want to affect the brand image. So there also you can say something about the brand, or like some kind of negative feedback. So first point is that what we are talking, that the considered for a relevance check. So relevance check is very important, that how much relevant is the point. As it is an anonymous, as they are not giving their name while reporting the negative feedback, maybe they are afraid of that the person might take a revenge on them after knowing who is making the complaint. So maybe that is why they are putting it as an anonymous complaint. Now if you need to see whether they are doing this relevance check or not. So the entity must have the mechanism that how they are accepting, and if they get an like anonymous feedback, then how they will be checking the relevance, how much relevant is the feedback. So that process, that SOP must be addressed. This particular point, when you are talking about grievance redressal mechanism, that whole mechanism must somewhere this anonymous feedback should be addressed in that grievance redressal mechanism policy. Is
Okay,
it clear now?
understood. Understood, understood. So then we need to look as an auditor, we need to look if the SOP also address the same and what is the
Right.
process the entity is practicing
Entity
or
will be,
they change.
yes, yes. Or will follow in case of any kind of anonymous complaint if they receive.
Right, right. Understood. Thanks, Anita.
Okay. Anybody else? Any other question? Okay, so then we will be moving to our next point. That is the next bucket, environment. So in environment, we didn't make a very big changes, but then certain points we feel that people need to be more vigilant and put more focus that how to make the require like how to adhere the requirements. Those are available in the checklist. To support that thing, we are again talking about this environment related this particular 2 points, E 1.1 and E 3.1, where we are talking about soil conservation, especially for the auditors to understand what are the points that they must audit, because we understand auditors are not specialized in soil or compost or related stuff. So that is the reason we are maybe we'll take 10-15 minutes time to talk about this particular thing once again so that people like the auditors can get more clarity, as well as the trainer and the entities know what are the basic practices they need to do to show as a part of version 3.1.0. So I'll transfer the call to Dr. Antara Bera, who is a specialist on this field, and she will share the screen and she'll take it from here. Just allow us a minute. Is the screen visible?
Yes, doctor.
It's visible, but try to go
Yes,
into
ma'am,
full
visible.
screen. Yeah, it's visible.
So it's in full screen. Whether are you able to see it in full screen or no?
No.
Okay, just a moment. Is it visible in full screen mode now?
No, doctor.
It's not in presentation mode.
No, no.
It's in the presentation mode, yeah.
No, we could see. It is
Okay.
clear and visible.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. Okay.
So, good afternoon, everybody. So I'll just come straight to the point. So when we talk about soil health management following regenerative agriculture practice in the environmental section, E1.1. So the first and most important part is that whenever we are looking for a plan, it should not be a theoretical plan. So there should be a plan on what if the garden is not already doing any such practice, there has to be a plan that has to be developed. But at the same time, we have to ensure that a part of the plan is already done when the implementers are visiting the gardens and thereafter when the certification bodies are auditing. So now, what is the objective of the soil health plan? So the objective is to incorporate and improve more of the soil conservation and soil fertility practices. And among that, what are the primary focus? The primary focus are the on-farm compost production and application, then mulching practice, which is covering the ground with any type of green vegetation, and the other is the practice of growing leguminous crops. Now, this is the practice that we will primarily focus on the soil health management plan. And when we talk about actually implementing those practices on field, so when we, like say if a garden is has made a plan for compost production and application, then there has to be a composting site, and there, if the garden is doing like say vermicomposting, then the beds have to be present. There should be inputs present in the bed, and there should be a clear maintenance of register, like when that bed was, the input was applied in the bed, what was the quantity, what was the components that were applied in what ratio, and then what are the harvest cycle estimated for that bed. So this is the plan that when an implementer is, our program implementer is going to the garden. So when they talk about soil health management plan, they should, apart from physical, apart from like verifying a plan on the paper, they should physically go and also check that what is happening in the field. Now, in the environmental section, there is another very important component, which is the integrated pest management plan. Now, what is the objective of the plan? The objective is to help the gardens in reducing their dependence on chemical pesticides. So what are the practices that can help them do that? So integrated pest management plan does not mean complete cessation of chemicals. It also does not mean just application of herbal concoctions, which I think most of the gardens understand as IPM. So no, that's not it. So it's like there are a number of practices which can be considered as part of the integrated pest management plan. So there are biopesticides which can be considered. There is, then obviously we have the herbal concoction in terms of the 5-leaf extract. Then there are mechanical options also, like use of actinic lights. Then there are cold weather practices where the gardens, some gardens apply neem and karanj oil. And also, like say, I think lime sulfur concoction is also well known by the gardens because this is one of the non-chemical inputs that are used for prevention and control of red spider, which is also one component that can be considered as part of the IPM. Now, again, as I mentioned for the soil health management plan, that the IPM plan also, apart from what is written on the paper, there has to be some activities that is going on during the site visit of the program implementers and thereafter the certification bodies. So now when we talk about verification, what are the components that we will focus on? So first and foremost important is the soil analysis report. Now this is important because when we are talking about improvement of soil health through the incorporation of regenerative agriculture practices, we should first have an understanding that what is the platform on which we are standing, or what is the quality of the soil at present. And so that gives us an idea that what is the improvement that we should work for. So soil analysis report will be available in most of the gardens, but what you will not get is the microflora analysis of the soil in terms of bacteria, fungi, and actinomycetes. So under this program, we are encouraging the gardens that when they are next collecting the soil and sending it for analysis, they should also get it tested for the microbial properties, because that is one of the important components which has been so far neglected. But actually, when we talk about regeneration of soil health, these are the components which play a most critical role in regenerating the soil nutrient dynamics. So this is one thing. The second is soil test-based fertilizer application. So there is a standard recommendation from the from our tea research institutes in the north and in the south, that as per the yield potentials, what should be the application dosage of N, P, and K per hectare. So when we are going to the gardens for verification, they have a pruning program where they mention section wise, what is year wise, what will be the prune, then if based on the prune, what will be the yield potential, and thereafter what will be the NPK dose that will be applied. So when we go for verification, we should ask for the pruning program and thereafter verify that whether uh, the dosage that is provided there is as per the standards recommended by the tree research institutes. Then when we are talking about composting program, we should look at infrastructure which will provide at least a 30 metric ton output from the present infrastructure, and going forward at least a 50 metric ton capacity. Now, how will you judge that? So say for a standard bed size, if let's talk about vermicompost, because there is heap composting also that the gardens are doing, but it is very difficult to actually recommend a bed size, because different gardens are doing different thing. Although we have a standard like dimension for the heap composting as well, which I can share with you. And then if somebody is doing heap composting, the verification has to be based on those standard recommendations. So now I'm coming to vermicompost bed, because that is something which I think if you go to the gardens, and if like say 10 gardens are doing composting, out of that 8 will be doing vermicomposting. So that's why I'm taking an example of a vermi bed. So for a standard bed size of maybe 12 feet length and 4 feet breadth and 3 feet height. So it will be 12 feet, and then 4 threes are 12. So 12, 12, 144 is the CFT. Now, obviously, it will not be filled up to 3 feet. So the filling up will be up to 2.5 feet, right? So the actual CFT will then come to, just a second. So we have 12 feet by 4 feet by 2.5 feet. So about 120 CFT. Okay. So 120 CFT, 1 CFT of cow dung is about roughly like 20 kg. So that gives you, so the weight will be, when it is filled, it will take a weight of about 2.4 metric tons. Now, when you get the final recovery of vermicompost, so that comes around 50%. So that means one bed in a cycle should give you about 1.4 metric ton of compost. Let us take 1 metric ton of compost. So this is how you verify that what is the bed size, what is the input that they have incorporated in the bed. So you have to calculate that what will be the approximate weight of the material that is provided in the bed, and then accordingly an estimated quantity of output in a cycle. So if a garden is doing like say 3 cycles, so they will be able to harvest 3 metric tons from one bed in a year. So for 30 metric tons, they have to make like 10 such beds, or they can increase the 12 feet to 24 feet, which is usually the recommendation that we provide, that instead of making small individual beds, you increase the length, because that gives you more coverage in terms of the area. So it gives you more output from a smaller area. So this is how you basically calculate that what will be the estimated quantity, and the plan of the gardens that you see on paper should follow a rough estimate like this only. So then the other component that we are looking at is manual weed management. Now, why this is necessary? Because when we talk about soil health, weedicide application is one of, apart from urea application, weedicide application is one component that has a major deterioration on both the physical properties as well as the microflora properties of the soil. So why manual weed management? Because when you resort to manual weed management, apart from your chemical herbicides, what happens is over a period of time, as you slowly increase the manually covered area, there is a visible improvement in the weed flora. So by improvement, what do I mean? It's not increasing their population, but more of broad-leaved micro vegetation, which are easier to tackle and which are not so much like detrimental as compared to the smaller leaved multiple web rooted weeds. So this is the reason why we will focus on whether a garden, apart from applying herbicides, is also covering up some of the area through manual weed management. Then when we talk about mulching application, when we talk about leguminous crops, we are actually only focusing on the newly planted area, because because in the rest of the maturity areas, this is not something that the gardens are doing. But when they plant, maybe that could be a block infilled area, or it could be a newly planted area. So in those areas, they usually go for covering, because a lot of ground remains open, because the plants are just spindly and they don't give proper ground coverage. So for covering the ground to minimize the loss of moisture, to keep the soil temperature under control, to restrict the growth of weeds, the gardens do go for mulching practices. So this is something which we are going to focus in the V3 implementing entities. Then shade tree, you know that there is standard recommendation zone wise by the tea research institutes. So we'll have to just check that whether the existing status is at least 70% of the standard recommendation. Now, how do you do that? So in the pruning program, again, you will find that there will be columns where they will show that what is the status of shade tree, whether it's good, whether it's bad, or whether it's moderate. So like say if they write good, then obviously there will be a background that you will have to ask, that when you mention good, what is the number that you are looking on a per hectare basis. So this is how you verify that whether the shade tree is at least standards, at least 70% of the standard recommendation. Then when we talk about integrated pest management plan, one of the most important component is the pest monitoring team. Because when you uh, identify the pest in the initial level, and when you take immediate action, it actually helps to even reduce the requirement of the chemicals. Because when you identify the pest in the initial stages, the pest will be lesser in number, they will be infesting a lesser area. So the requirement can be the pest management can be done in a smaller area, maybe on a block spraying basis or on a spot spraying basis. So when you are not spraying the entire section, it automatically reduces the requirement that you were having at the end of the year. So that does have an implication on your total usage around the year. So this is very important. So what you would ask, I'll go into details later. The other part is the PPC approved chemical. So this is something which is non-negotiable. The gardens must stick to the PPC approved chemicals when they are going for pest management. And residue testing report is again mandatory, and the biodiversity action plan. I think there hasn't been much change on that, so I'm not going into details. So I have just given here photographs of some of the gardens who are implementing the V3 and how they are doing that. So these are the vermicomposting units that have been made. These are the heap compost that the gardens raised during the winter works. So these heaps are made completely out of cow dung, and they made that in one of the central composting units. So this is another example of heap composting, which was made through tea waste and cow dung in 80-20 ratio. So I'll just show a video here. So this is the tea waste composting that was done. Okay. So this I have already mentioned that what you should like verify when you are going to the estates or the entities who are implementing V3. So the analysis report, when you are looking at, you should see what are the parameters from analysis that they are doing, and then whether there is any microbial analysis, which you are not going to get most in most of the gardens. Then what is the total number of samples that are tested yearly? And if they are not doing that, then they have to make a plan and start sending the samples for analysis. And then the reports have to be verified on actual basis. So then the verification by CBs will concern the plan for soil analysis, especially the microbial parameters, and then the physical verification of the analysis reports. Then, as I mentioned, that for soil test-based fertilizer application, you have to consider the pruning program or the section-wise manuring program, which every garden will have, and followed by verification of the fertilizer quantity from the procurement invoices, which I think every garden will have. So that should not be a major problem. Then
If somebody is having a question, please unmute yourself and ask.
Ma'am, this site again, Madhura, for one, I am one of the auditor for this trustee program. So
Right.
there is one point is that the total number of sample tested yearly. So here is my question, ma'am. What is the total number of sample? What is the ideal number of sample they should send? Or in case it is a small tea growers, is it required for each and every team which small tea growers need to send a sample for testing? Or in some area, one or two sample is sufficient, like that?
So I'll just answer your first question. So what the gardens generally do, that the big estates generally do, is that they generally analyze their samples for the pruned area. So for the LP area majorly, not even the DS area. So that will like comprise about 33% maybe of the total area. So based on their total planted area, or you can just ask that what is your LP area. So say a garden is saying that I have like say about 50 hectare of LP area. So then you will ask that, what is the total number of samples? So it is not like it is a single figure for every estate. A small estate with say 250 hectare area might have like just say 25% of its garden as the LP area, and could require just about 10 to 15 samples for analysis. Whereas a big garden, say about 700 or 800 hectare area, could have about 25, like say 200 hectare area under pruning. So they will have a lot more sample as compared to the other garden. But you will have to check whether they are getting the samples tested from at least the LP area. That is what you can check when you are checking the number of samples tested in a year. So that's
Okay.
the answer for the estates. Now, for the small growers, see, although like a small grower will have a very small farm size or a very small holding, and it's a normal like idea that soil in a zone does not change much. But when we talk about small tea growers, obviously not every grower is applying the same quantity of fertilizer in his farm, right? And when we are talking about testing of soil quality, a lot of soil quality in the long run is getting affected by how much fertilizer you are actually applying in the soil. So if like you are talking about a very, very general parameter like pH a lot depends upon what type of dosage you are applying in the soil in terms of the chemical fertilizers, and whether you are doing any correction practices for the if your pH is going down. So ideally, one small tea grower should at least get one sample tested. So that could be 1 in 3 years. But I think that the proper way that we should do is that we should tell a grower that if you have a farm, like say it can be a very small size farm, but at least get your sample tested once every 3 years, because that helps him to understand that what is the impact of his specific practice. Because the obviously when he's going for pest control also, he's applying a lot of pesticide, and that's actually trickling into the ground, and that is also causing a lot of harm on the soil health. So although we feel that, what difference will it make, but it does make a difference. So considering that the financial constraint, we can suggest that at least once in every 3 years, they should get their soil sample tested.
Okay, okay. Okay, understood, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay. So I'll just move on to the next slide. So then on-farm composting, as I said, that there has to be a verification of the plan, but there also has to be a physical verification of the composting site. And register should be maintained in terms of composting site. A proper register should be maintained. A proper board should be put up that what is being done there. So if it is vermicompost, there has to be a proper bed, that how many proper signboard, that how many beds are there, what is the dimension of the individual bed size, when were the beds initiated, and there should be a register that on which day what activity was done, and an estimated quantity from each bed, and like what were the components that were incorporated in the bed on which date. So these are certain components which should be present in the register, so that when the auditors go, they should be very clear that, okay, this is what is happening at the composting site. Now, the same applies for manual weed management. So you will get a proper record of this when you verify the cultivation records, because this will be kept by every other garden. There will be like proper documentation that how many man days has been deployed for manual weed management, and what is the task per man day. So even if you do not get the total area covered through manual weed management, if you have the total number of man days deployed and the task for per man day, then you can always calculate the total area covered under manual weed. And that also, then if you divide by the total planted area, it gives you the number of rounds of manual weed management that the garden did. So this is how you have to verify. Then the presence of leguminous plants in the newly planted area or mulching practice, that also has to be physically verified. And then the name of the sections has to be identified, and that's the cross verification has to be through the cultivation records, where you will get the details that what was the number of plants per hectare that was planted. In terms of mulching, they would have records of what is the number of man days that they deployed for bringing the like the green matter for mulching, and thereafter for application in that section. So there will be proper records. You only have to verify those records to get a confirmation on whether the garden is actually doing that practice. Then shade tree, again, you have to verify it, and you will get it in the cultivation records in the pruning program that I told you earlier. Then pest monitoring team is again very important. And then I have mentioned here that what are the questions that you should ask when you are verifying that whether the garden has an established pest monitoring team. So you have to ask that, who spots the pest first, and who is he reporting to? How many hectares does a spotter oversee? Who holds the meeting with the team and in what frequency? Because these will actually help you to understand that whether the garden is actually doing something when they are talking about the pest monitoring team, because that has a very strong relevance on bringing down the use of pesticides, and it actually helps out in integrated pest management plan. So again, when the auditors from the certification bodies are going, they should also follow up with certain questions with the team to just verify that yes, what has been provided in the records is actually happening in the garden. Now, integrated pest management, again, if they are saying that they are applying oil combinations, you have to ask them when they are applying, and then you have to go back and check their cultivation records, because there will be mention in the sections, per sections, what is the type of oil they applied, when they applied, how many mandates were deployed for that. So these all will be available in the cultivation records. If they have set up physical or mechanical traps, you have to actually go to the sections and verify those. For preparations like ITK, biopesticides, lime sulfur, they have to maintain registers like the ones I told you about the compost manufacturing. So they have to write down what is the type of like non-chemical concoction or input they are making in the garden. Then the day when it was started, what was the input that was in terms of the quantity, what is the estimated output, and on which date that estimated output will be ready, and by which date it will be applied. Why it is important? Because when certain gardens are applying ITK, they just feel that, we are just mixing it and we are keeping it, and then whenever we get time, we just apply it. But that should not be a case. There is a proper standard that needs to be maintained in terms of what you are using, how much you are using, what is the time period till which you are keeping that, and within which time you are finishing off the application. So these are very, very crucial in understanding that yes, if the garden is taking up integrated pest management activity, it is doing as per proper standard methodologies. So I've just shown here certain mechanical traps. Then we have biopesticides. So there are a couple of different biopesticides that the people will be using. So I have mentioned that some of the the names of the organisms which are generally used by the gardens as biopesticide. Then certain gardens are also spraying neem oil, Karanj oil during the winter work. So these are all components which can be considered for integrated pest management. So these are few pictures of the lime sulfur. So when you are actually verifying the concoction, you just ask them to stir the drum, and then you have to see that whether the what is the color, because the color actually gives you a normal identification that the process of lime sulfur preparation has been completed, and that it has been done as per standard methodologies. So ITK, again, I told you that it's very, very important to understand that so the garden should have, if it is making ITK, it should have a proper board which should be raised at the point where ITK is being prepared in terms of what are the components that are being used, in what quantity, like say if it is making 100 liter, what are the quantity of different components that is going into those 100 liter, how many days it is kept in the process, and then within which date it is being applied, because it is not advisable to keep it for a long period of time, because that can cause a lot of other problems as well in terms of disease, in terms of pest proliferation. So if the garden is doing that, they should adhere to the standard practices. So I think these does not require much detailing, because we know that these are like PPC approved chemical application and residue testing reports. These are mandatory components, and obviously the garden should have a proper biodiversity action plan. Yes, so thank you so much. If you want me to answer any questions, please, you can put up your queries. Yeah, so I think that we are clear on this. So thank you, Anandita. You can just take over.
Thank you, Patanjali, for enlightening us about this crucial topic. So again, I'll go back to the previous presentation. Just give me a moment. Is my screen visible?
Yes, yes.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so we have completed the discussion on this particular segment, but I would just like to bring your attention to this one line that we have again made some modification in that line, like where people were actually thinking that making ITK is a mandatory thing. So it is not only about ITK. So what is ITK? Basically, it is the indigenous technical knowledge that from our the practices from the old time, and that is actually giving us some result in a different ways. So that can be an ITK, that can be an oil spray, that can be any other standard recommendation. So if some garden is not having the ITK in many places, maybe for South India or maybe for some organic garden, maybe they are not doing this ITK, but instead of ITK, they are doing something else, or they're practicing something else. So that can also be considered. Though it is a mandatory criteria point, but please remember that IPM is mandatory. ITK is not mandatory. ITK can be there. It is like the plan should focus on adoption of alternate control measures like biological control and or practices based on ITK and or oil spray and or any other standard recommendation. So either of these two or all of them or any two, any three, whatever the entity can do practice in the same way. And we are not at this point of time focusing on the STG soil test for this particular requirement like microflora and other stuffs. We are just asking for the basic soil test, that also in a cluster basis. So it's not that if some STG like the Botley factory is having like 400 small tea growers under them, so you as an auditor need 400 soil test reports. It's not like that, because it's a huge cost. And once we are talking about this soil test, we are going as a cluster wise. So maybe we have already in our one of previous this thing we mentioned what is the cluster, and if you see the new code, you will see the meaning, the definition of cluster, how we are taking like a minimum 50 like maximum 50 number of growers, or 50 hectares of land, 10 growers or 15 growers based on the land area, but maximum 50 hectares of land for one sample, and that cluster has to be in one region, so like one location. So if there is one location where you can get like 10 15 growers together whose land area is approximately maybe 15 20 hectares, so you can take it as a cluster. This for the entities, for the bottling factories to understand, and for the trainers as well while implementing or training them on this particular requirement. So that's how we are seeing. We are not saying that every person must have, but it is a area wise soil test we are talking about. So please go through our the glossary part of trustee standard and check that what the cluster means to us for when it comes to an STG soil test part. Moving to the next chapter. So E5, where we are talking about West. So this is a very small change where we are saying that you have to ensure that like the entity has to ensure that their waste will be handing over to the government licensed operator. This particular statement was not there, but we just give it a more clarity. We have added this one, and as well as we changed the necessary things in our audit checklist as well. Going to the 5 E5.2, where we are talking about again the waste disposal thing. So we are talking about a policy where the policy shall be in a place to the management for the management of plastic production or purchase, use and end of life treatment that is updated periodically. So plastic is a very huge waste, as we all know. It's something which is a concern in today's world of sustainability. So how to dispose the plastic waste, what is the end of life treatment, and whether they're continuously updating that periodically or not, like the kind of plastic mainly, apart from the small things, the plastic that people are using inside the bag while packing, that is again a very big thing, because there are like huge number of plastic waste are coming out of from those bags, packing materials. So that is something very important where you should focus, and the policy must talk about that as well. So a plastic policy that includes all these specific points is mandatory. Coming to 6.2, the very small changes, the energy audit that was 5 years at the very beginning, when we launched the new code, we changed it to 3 years. So when we are talking about 3 years, like we know that our audit cycle is for 2 years. So before the audit on version 3.1, the entity must undergo one audit for energy. Now, once they do it, it will be automatically valid for next 3 years. So when the audit agency is again going after 2 years, the same report will be valid. So it is not that before every year audit you have to do one audit, one what do you say, that one energy test, energy audit test. But the second time of the audit during the recertification also, the same audit report will be valid if it is done within 3 years. Now after that, when the fifth year the audit agency is going, before that again they have to perform one energy audit, like within that 2 years time span. Like if year one they have done the audit, and year one they have done the energy audit, and year one they have done the external audit also for certification. Now when year three they are going for recertification, in year three the recertification, that time the energy audit is not mandatory, because the energy audit completes it's the second year and it's running on the third year. Now on the year five, when we are again going for our recertification, that time there has to be one more energy audit which should be done on the year four or year five in that time. So that's why we are saying that at least once in every 3 years the energy audit should be carried out. Now this is a very new addition to our system that we will be talking about. Already I have circulated within my team that all the energy auditors who are going for energy audit now, they has to enroll in TCMS at first for their attendance part. So we already shared a manual for the energy auditors, user manual for TCMS, and they will be circulating with the entities, and I myself will be circulating with the entities about that manual, and that we will be available in our website as well. So it's a very simple thing. Just whosoever you are connecting with now, just tell them to download the application like TCMS, go to the web, they register themselves with their name, organization's name. If any individual is doing who is qualified for energy audit, that person can do individually, like uploading his or her credentials, like relevant certificates and other similar documents. And if it is an organization, and from that organization the person who is coming for audit or the team, they must enroll the similar way with their credentials as well. So once it's like 5-6 points will be there, they will fill that form, and the similar way, the way the auditors are getting their credentials, the entities are getting their credentials, the similar way the energy auditor will get his or her credential in their email or over messages. So in that there will be a link, and they will click the link, and they will select the entity where they are going for their audit, and they can just, once they go to the place, they will start audit, giving their attendance. That will capture the lat long of that particular location, and there will be one more place where once they complete the audit they will check out, and there will be one option to upload the audit. So they will audit report, so they will complete their audit report, they will make it in PDF file, and they will upload that PDF file in that particular application. So it's a very simple thing. I just give it a brief. our people will be sharing the information with you as well, and I myself will be sharing the information to all of you. But before doing the energy audit, this is now mandatory.
ম্যাম একটা আস্কিং পয়েন্ট ছিল
Yeah, please tell me.
if any unit has done its energy audit in 2025 and it already implemented all the recommendation within by 2027. So if there is no scope to carve down the consumption, so in that case what will happen?
No, see, for in our case, what is our thing that we want to see whether the energies are being optimized or not. So it is optimized. If it is optimized, then it is okay. Like as an auditor, I will check the recommendation part and I will see how or what is their plan, because at times these recommendations comes with the huge cost. They need to change the machinery, they need to change many other things as well. So that is a very huge amount of infrastructure cost that they must consider in their expenditure. CapEx. So, but then maybe the company is not in a position. So they can have a plan of 5 years, 7 years time, and they can keep on monitoring that whatever is there, they should not that should not increase. So what are the plans they are having in their day to day? What are the practice they are doing in their day to day functions, operations, and to uh, address the recommendation. What is their take? What is their plan? Maybe they are the small things they will be planning in next 1 year. Maybe which are coming with a bigger cost that they will plan maybe in year 2 or 3 or 4. We are not saying that it has to be done. That recommendation has to be closed. That is not our thing. Our point is that the entity must know where the energy consumptions are happening, if there is a option to optimize that, or if there is no wastage. A very basic small things in the regular practice and awareness. If they do, then that will reduce. So that can be done. Those are the small things, but eventually they need to understand that this energy audit thing is very much linked with their commercial thing. So if they actually implement the whole thing, their cost of production will come down. So that is also again very important thing for them to understand. But as a trustee, from a trustee parlance, we cannot say that you have to adhere these things within like 1 year or 2 years down the line. It's not like that. They can have their own plan based on this, the requirement. Yes, Mr. Bothra. Any other question from anybody?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Hi, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I had a question like for us, we have our own electrical engineer, and we've been we did this energy audit, which one of your competent persons had done. And when we found when we compared the audit report, this is we've been doing this thing in-house, and like now, would you accept that records that we do in-house and the practices that we do after our electrical engineer does the reporting?
So the electrical, yes. So if the electrical engineer is qualified as per
He's an
our.
electrical engineer. He's a
No, that is
proper
what I'm
electrical
saying.
engineer.
So in TCMS, you will see there is a link to the guidelines of the qualification for to become an electrical energy auditor. So an electrical engineer only will not maybe help. So just check those guidelines. So I'm sure if he is BE approved, then he
Yeah,
can do. So then
he
he
has
has
to
to
be.
just.
Okay, because I did check that thing, and he has to qualify through an examination.
Right, exactly. So once he finishes that, so he can be in-house. That's not a problem. You just need to ask him to do the enrollment through the TCMS application, and it is not for the day-to-day checkup. It is for the energy audit once in a year, like yearly you are doing, or minimum once in 3 years you are doing. So for that reason, we need the energy audit. We just need to check that the credibility of the overall audit, that it is actually happening, because we have actually come across some practices that was happening, and we are trying to stop that, where people are actually not going but issuing a certificate, a report for energy audit. So just to stop all these things and to have a better visibility on overall system, so we have introduced this particular application. So it's a very basic thing. You can ask your person to just register into that system. But again, as I said, like that person should be qualified. It can be in-house, that's not a problem. But the person should be qualified to do an energy audit as per the requirement. So that is something. Maybe we can take it up on
Yeah,
a separate platform.
because this is quite expensive.
I know, but
Uh,
as I said, like it is expensive because you are actually getting some good recommendation, which if you
See,
follow.
these recommendations are very basic and very simple recommendations that they are giving.
But it
You need
depends on
power,
the
you need
people,
power.
the
These
auditor.
are very basics. These are very basic. You need a power capacitor here. Your power capacity thing is PF factor is gone up, so you need a power factor there. This is your thing. You need you need a 15 HP motor here. You've got a you've put a 25 horsepower motor. So these are all basic things. Even but for this now, for this energy audit thing now again. Like for us, we've got an electrical engineer, that's okay. But for most of the other companies and other entities, they don't have an electrical engineer. For them, it's going to be a very expensive affair. And if you need to do it
No,
for
it's
every
once
each and
in
every
three
garden,
years. I will
then
say,
you
I
are
mean,
the basic idea of these trustee audits. Why we are going, because we wanted it to be user friendly, and we wanted it for the producer companies to be sustainable. Now you're just increasing a cost. So
no. I mean,
energy
I
audit,
would
you should
say,
have.
Mr. Botra, I would say this is, first of all, this is not the right platform where we are talking this one, because I'm talking about the changes from V3 to 3.1.
That's
So
what
maybe we can take it up
I
in a
we
different
we
platform.
we
And
don't have platforms. This is the only one way I
so
could speak.
you
So
can
that's why I'm
we can
speaking.
talk it separately, because as we all know, and we have already talked to many agencies just to understand before making it mandatory. So we have understood that for a big company also, for a factory having usage of maybe 400 or that, based on that capacity, so it is like maybe 1.5 day to 2 days audit, which will not cost you more than 30 to 35,000, and that is applicable for 3 years. So per year, 10,000 rupees. It is actually not that costly. So that we have already discussed, and we have taken consideration from the stakeholders' inputs and everything. We discussed. We had a very big discussion on this. That of course, when it comes to a cost thing, people are actually so doing it in a very high cost affair. They're asking, but then we actually spoken to the agencies. We actually spoken to the energy auditors and everybody. Like we told them, is it possible to come down to take this in 40 or 30,000 for 2 days or 2.5 day or 1.5 day, which actually happening. So if you say that 30,000 or 40,000 rupees for 3 years, it is very expensive. I think we should take it in on a platform then.
Have you fixed this rate? Because we didn't
No,
pay
no, we
30,000.
have
We
not
paid
fixed
more than
this
that.
rate, but you can take quotation from different people. You can talk to our program managers on the respective areas where they know already many
If it
people.
is, see, Ms. Mukherjee, if it is 30,000, I don't mind. But we paid
That's
quite a
what I'm
lot.
saying. No. That's why I'm saying you better. That is why I said that maybe we can take it up in a different platform, because our respective program managers from the respective areas, they are already
Right.
having
Okay.
people.
Noted.
So you can have 3, 4 quotation, and whichever is you think feasible, you can always go with them.
Right.
So
Thanks.
we are
Thanks a lot.
not
Noted.
fixing anything that way. Okay. Okay. So moving forward to our next bucket. Safety. So when we are talking about safety, there are few changes we have incorporated. That is under S 3.2, we are talking about the risk assessment part. So risk assessment already we had spoken. Now we are saying that the document shall have a health and safety committee responsible for overall safety related risk mitigation, because nowadays, as we all know, this is a very important thing to be to focus, because many accidents are happening in factories and gardens. So what we realize that when we are talking about a risk assessment document, there the ownership is not there. So ownership is very important. Otherwise, you are having risk calculation, risk acceptability. Then you are putting some mitigation factor. Then what is the final the risk calculation is coming, whether that is acceptable or not, and who is the owner. So only having something in pen and paper will not, of course, helping us to understand or support the intent of the requirement. So that is why we need people who will take the ownership of this particular risk related thing, and especially for when it comes to health and safety. So there we need a committee who will be checking on like periodically check on this particular risk related factors wherever it has been addressed like as a risk. That is something you need to mention in your risk assessment. Audit checklist we have changed accordingly. Then coming to S 3.11, where we are talking about the compliance to the Child Labor Prohibition Act is mandated, and the child and young labor policy shall cover the remediation measure in case of violation. So we all know, and we are all sure, very much sure of that, we do not encourage this child labor thing. But so that is anyways, it is not there. But in case if there is something that we find during our audit, like apart from child labor, if there is young labor also, because young labor actually is something that the adolescent labor we accept, and there is a provision of their work in Factories Act also, how many hours, like 27 hours in a week they can work, and what are the additional parks they are supposed to get. So all these things are there. But if there, in case there is any kind of violation, so what would be the remediation measures or factors will be taken by the entity, that should be mentioned in this particular policy that we are talking about, the young and child labor policy. So you must have a policy where you address this particular requirement. That is something we have incorporated in 3.11. Moving to the next slide. This is our last bucket, changes in livelihood, and it's already one almost, but I would take maybe another 5 to 10 minutes. I hope this is okay with you all, just to finish up this discussion. So L 1.1, where we have added that a process, the entity must establish a process for the workers to be provided with information relating to any decision that changes or affects their terms of employment. So at the very beginning only, when we talked about the addressing the policy changes to the workers representative, so this is also in the similar line. So you have to have a process where if there is any change in your process, in any kind of policy, any right you are talking about, which like related to the workers, so that they need to be informed, like any kind of wages, change in the wages, that they need to be informed that this is what is the present wage now. Based on that, this will be your PF. Based on that, this will be your gratuity, maternity, everything. So these information should be there should be a process that whenever any changes that is taking place which will affect the workers, that should be that information should be populated within the workforce. So that is the reason we have put this particular requirement. We have added this one. Coming to the next point, where this is a zero tolerance criteria point. So again, it is talking about the policy. So company policies on wages and appointment letters shall state that the compensation and remuneration will be based on the applicable CB or government notified wages. So now we are very much focusing on, even if it is one page, but also you have to hand over an appointment letter to the workers, whether it is permanent, whether it is temporary. So there has to be one letter from the HR side stating that the workers from so and so date they are employed, and these are the basic things that they are eligible for. So that is something we have to have. The HR must have that copy of that policy, and the person who is joining, that person must have all these policies, all this kind of an appointment letter, where this will be stated that how much will be the wages, how much will be their PF, the gratuity, if in case of permanent workers, in case of and the maternity thing, irrespective of male or female, just you can write wherever applicable, but the act wise their benefit that should be mentioned. So the appointment letter is very important now, and it is mandatory. It's not mandatory, it's actually zero tolerance. And people who are already employed, it is now time to give them like an appointment letter. You need not to give them at like 12 years, 20 years back dated, but at least you write one thing that in continuation to your existing job, this is the kind of wages or the rights that you are eligible for, and make an, even if it is one page, as I said, 2 pages, 3 pages, up to you, but at least take 1 page and please share with all your workers, take their cognizance to that, because it's a requirement now. Going to the next one, these are all, you can say, the similar line where we are talking about the policies for regulating the working hours. So as I said, like in one appointment later only, you can put all these requirements. That what is the regular working hours, overtime, that shall be clearly stated. Then overtime is voluntary and no penalties will be imposed on the workers for refusing overtime. Availability of provisions of equal opportunity for overtime among all type of workers, and way of workers to report cases in voluntary overtime to management must be a part of the policy. So you can have a policy and you can refer the policy to the appointment letter, so that the appointment letter will be small, but also that appointment letter will be addressing that the policy which is available at the entry door of the factory or the garden, wherever it is applicable. That should be visible clearly in the local language or the language that the people will understand who are working there. So these components are very important, and these are on zero tolerance. So please start working on that for the trainers, for the people, like changing these things, adding these things. This is now time to do. So whenever we are doing this version 3.1.0, because that is already started from January 1st, and we are not doing audit version 3, but we are doing audits in version 3.1.0. So these will be there, and for the auditors, if you find any kind of violation in this, it is not like now only will be decertifying them, but case to case basis we will discuss. Because when it comes to a policy, maybe it will take time. In one day cannot be changed. So maybe in case of these things, we can give them time to make the policy. But yes, if there violation on the working hours, overtime payment, and all these things, that is zero tolerance, because that was from the very beginning it was there. But when it comes to a policy making changes and stuffs like that, we can always raise a non-conformity on the mandatory for next 3 months, and within that time period, unless they are not closing the non-conformity, we won't be able to issue the certificate, but we are not decertifying the people. So case to case basis, if you find these kind of like gaps during your audit, please do discuss with us before taking a final decision. Next slide, we are talking about this one already we have discussed. So again, it's a kind of a repetition in L2.1, where we are talking about a clear process of including inputs received from the workers' representative shall be considered during the policy making. So you have to have a policy as well. You have to have a process of making the policy. So the SOP of policy making, which will cover all these points from who are all the stakeholders first you need to address for what kind of policy, and based on that how you are taking inputs from those stakeholders, like during any kind of union meeting or any like small awareness program, and then taking their acceptance on the attendance, and part of the attendance, whichever way. But you have to have a SOP of making policies, and you have to name the policies, and for which policy, what are the who are the stakeholders and how you are engaging them. That should be reflected in that particular SOP. Uh, Going to L point 2.3, where we are talking about the inclusion of the ILO definition of slave labor, and then we put a lot in this particular requirement because, as I said, that HR document procedures are very important. So training on employment must include all workers, including new joinees. Why we say that? Again, in the very beginning only, I said that it is very important to give the information, pass on the information every workers workforce who all are joining, because what we have seen during our audit, that maybe once they are giving the training in a year, or once in 6 months they are giving training. But then during that 6 months, if people are joining, like today I have given one training, and then after a week there are 5 people who are joining, and as I have given a training today, so I'll be giving again after 6 months, and then that 6 months these people are working without knowing their rights. That is not acceptable. So everywhere you must follow an induction program based on their safety, their rights, and an appointment letter, as I said. So when an appointment letter also you're issuing, that is carrying these requirements. So even like on one-on-one individually, if you're not giving the training, then also the appointment letter is carrying the information which will act as a training, that once they read the appointment letter or you explain the appointment terms and condition with them, so they will be automatically, that can be also taken into consideration as a induction or as a joining training. So for the new joinees, it is a mandatory, and otherwise also maybe once in a year, that is as per your regular practice, you can do. So that ensured the pertaining of necessary information about termination, retirement, disciplinary actions, documented HR procedure of transparent recruitment and training procedure for migrant workers with clear, complete information about their working terms and conditions as well as their rights, pre-departure and post-arrival. So for migrant workers also, it is very, very important to tell them, because locals are like maybe aware of the local laws or requirements, but then in case of migrant workers, as always there will be a language barrier. So it is very important to talk to in their language so that they understand, having competency within your team so that that person can take care of all these people, the migrant people. And that policy must talk about all these, their rights, their pre-departure and post-arrival, in a language that they understand. So this is very important. And separate policy for migrant labor must include the necessary information on freedom of movement, terms of joining and leaving the organization. So again, as I said, that during our audits, we have found out many places that people doesn't know how to go back to their home, because they have like when they joined and they said that we have been told that if we leave, we will not get these benefits. So they are all like vague answers. They are not clear what is their right, and what are the things that they are supposed to get. Whether as they are migrants, they are very badly used for overtime works and all. So this is very, very important to have a separate migrant labor policy, which will talk about all these things. And process for management monitoring must be ensured at all level. So as I said in the SOP, that management monitoring is a must thing that you need to include. 12.2.5, we are talking about equality of treatment, and there we have added this one, that availability of documented procedures shall ensure transparency in recruitment, complete information sharing to all workers about their working terms and condition as well as their rights, pre-departure, post-arrival, and language they understand. So the similar thing, as I said, once you do this proper HR induction letter, appointment letter, and the policies reference to those letters, and the policy displayed. So that is more or less the main changes is version 3.1.0. In a nutshell, I can say that. For L2, so the one-liner we added in 2.9, that is awareness program shall be placed to increase the safety of for women in and reduce gender-based violence for both the workers and women in the community. So again, like wherever it is applicable, basically, so for bottling factories, maybe the community awareness is not that way very much applicable. But yes, if they can do it in place of big STGs and LTGs, if they are having, maybe once in a year they can just make a program for all the women workers, women small tea growers, owners, and all. So, and of course, not only for women, but also for men to understand what is the gender-based violence and what is harassment and how to reduce, what are the consequences, what are the punitive action a woman like a police can take against these kind of cases if it is reported. So all these things you can take it as an awareness program to the community, and they must have a plan. Basically, we are talking that they have a plan, and the maybe next 2 years, 3 years down the line, when they're coming from the for the audit, then they can see whether as per the plan you have done that or not. So I would say think wisely and then make the plan. Next point, L 2.10, where we are talking about this. This is something which is in line with the POSH Act actually. So there, earlier we talked about this till oral communication only, but eventually whatever grievance or complaint is coming against the post related activity, then it has to be like in writing. The final complaint shall be in writing, and in case of complaint cannot be made in writing, the presiding officer or any other member from the internal committee or the local committee, that is IC or LC, shall render all reasonable assistance to the woman for making the complaint in writing. The mechanism must ensure the confidentiality and safety of the aggrieved woman or the reporter is protected. So this is again very important. Again, the changes you have to make in the SOP, that you are considering these things in case of in any kind of any like case happens. So that can be considered only if there is a writing complaint, final complaint, and if the aggrieved woman is not in a position to write, then maybe a reporter on her behalf will write, taking her cognizance to that particular uh, complaint. And the presiding officer or any other member should help them to do this, the overall thing. That mechanism must be there. Okay. One thing I would just like to say that we have added in our checklist, but I have not mentioned it here. That is, in case of maternity thing, though we all know that, but still I specifically added that requirement in our code. I mean, in the checklist. Here we are talking about the code, so that is why I have not mentioned, but I would like to talk about that. That we have added one particular sub criteria under the maternity thing where the maternity test is totally zero tolerance when it comes for at the time of joining or as a part of any other regular health checkup. So only if as a woman a person comes and say that I am pregnant, and to confirm the date for their to get the maternity benefit, that time it can be tested once that person confirms it. Otherwise, during joining or in a regular health checkup process, it is never ever acceptable to do any kind of maternity check, test check. So we have come across many places as a part of. They say that it's a regular health checkup for the new joinees, but some typical test is there which will say that whether the lady is pregnant or not. So that is totally zero tolerance for us. So please keep that in mind. And if you have some such process, please remove that from that joining process, or even if as a regular health checkup process. So this is all more or less about version 3.1.3. So if you have any question now also we can talk, or maybe later on also we'll be having more webinar, more discussion on this. And whenever you are having any kind of query or any confusion, please, we are always available. Our program managers are also available. I'm available. Do write to us, do talk to us. And before taking any decision on a very serious issue, please discuss if at all, if you have a confusion or question on that.
Thank you, Anandita, for such a detailed and thorough presentation on the key insights and takeaway from the changes in the updated version 3.1.0. And I would like to thank all the participants who are present here for listening patiently. And in case anybody has any other queries that they would like to address, please feel free to connect with Anandita directly over a mail in case you have any other queries apart from this. And we are glad to have you in this session. And thank you everybody for joining in.